The first light of dawn fell across Ethan Cole's orchard, casting long golden rays over the grass still wet with dew. But this morning, something unsettled him. Fresh paw prints cut across the soft earth between his apple trees, deeper and wider than any stray dog could leave. They circled the orchard like a restless guardian, then vanished into the brush. Ethan paused, listening, when a low, haunting cry rose from the hills. It wasn't the yip of a coyote or the bark of a neighbor's hound. It was the unmistakable call of a wolf. His chest tightened. Wolves weren't supposed to wander this close, not with livestock nearby. The orchard, usually his refuge, felt changed, charged with an electricity he couldn't shake. He didn't know it yet, but those prints were the first sign of a bond that would test the limits of loyalty and trust. Rusty, Ethan's golden retriever pup, bounded through the orchard with careless joy, nose pressed low to the ground. The prints fascinated him, pulling him toward the tree line. Ethan called after him, but the pup was already gone, slipping between the branches like a spark of gold. His barks echoed faintly, then silence swallowed the morning. Ethan jogged forward, heart pounding with unease, when the brush ahead rustled. Rusty emerged, tail wagging furiously, nudging something forward. Out from the shadows stumbled a wolf pup, its ribs sharp beneath a thin, spotted coat, its eyes wide and frantic. The small creature froze in the sunlight, trembling. Ethan stopped dead, unable to process what he was seeing. A wolf pup in his orchard, delivered at the side of his own dog. It was an impossible picture, one that didn't belong in his world, and yet here it was.
The wolf pup crouched low, legs stiff with fear, its shallow breaths betraying exhaustion. Rusty circled it with a gentleness rare for a puppy, nudging softly as though encouraging the small creature forward. Then, from the dark thicket, a heavier presence emerged. Ethan's blood turned cold. The mother wolf stepped into view, her coat ragged, her frame lean but muscular, a scar dragging across her flank. Her amber eyes locked onto Ethan's, steady and unblinking, full of caution but not outright rage. For an instant, the orchard seemed frozen between worlds, one of cultivation and one of wilderness. Rusty, unfazed, padded back to Ethan's side, tail swaying as if introducing friends. The pup whimpered and pressed close to its mother, but she did not lunge. Instead, she lowered her head, holding Ethan's gaze as though demanding he understand what she truly wanted. Ethan's instinct screamed at him to retreat, but years of living near the wild taught him something else. Panic only broke fragile moments. He stood still, muscles tense, his breath shallow. The wolf mother's limp became visible as she shifted her weight, her wound slowing her. The pup pressed against her side, still weak, eyes darting nervously between Ethan and Rusty. Then, to his disbelief, Rusty sat down in the grass, tail thumping once before curling beside the wolf pup. The contrast was almost surreal. Golden retriever puppy against wild-born predator's child, resting shoulder to shoulder like siblings. Ethan exhaled, heart pounding, realizing this was no accident. The wolves hadn't stumbled in by chance. They were here for something. The mother's stare deepened, protective yet pleading. For the first time, Ethan sensed he wasn't just being watched, he was being asked.
The orchard's silence was overwhelming, every rustle of leaves amplifying Ethan's heartbeat. Slowly, he crouched, lowering himself to appear less threatening. His hands trembled as he reached into his bag and pulled free a strip of meat saved from the night before. Without a word, he laid it gently on the grass between them and stepped back. The wolf mother's ears twitched, but she did not move. Instead, she nudged her pup forward. Hesitant steps carried it closer until its nose met the scent. The pup's hunger overpowered fear, and it tore at the meat with desperate jaws. Rusty watched patiently, his tail wagging faintly, as though satisfied that the gift was accepted. Ethan felt his chest tighten. This wasn't aggression. This was trust, offered in fragments. And standing in his own orchard, he realized the wild had chosen him as its witness. The wolf mother lowered herself slowly, settling into the grass while keeping her wounded flank turned away from Ethan's view. Her amber eyes stayed on him, unblinking, but she made no move toward the meat. Instead, she licked her pup's head as it devoured the food, signaling approval but also restraint. Ethan felt a strange pull at the sight. This was no reckless predator, no ruthless killer. This was a mother making choices, weighing survival against danger, choosing her pup over her pride. Rusty leaned forward, nose brushing against the pup's ear, as though welcoming it to a new circle. The pup responded with a hesitant nuzzle, its first gesture of trust beyond blood. Ethan drew a shaky breath, knowing full well this fragile piece could shatter in seconds. Yet somehow, it didn't. The orchard had become a sanctuary where predator and protector met.
The days that followed unfolded like a secret ritual. Each morning, Ethan stepped into the orchard with fresh food, placing it carefully on the same patch of grass. Each time, the wolf pup was the first to eat, encouraged by Rusty's playful nudges. And each time, the mother wolf lingered back, waiting until her pup finished before touching a single bite. Ethan grew fascinated by the pattern, her discipline, her sacrifice. Rusty's role became more than companion. He was bridge and translator, softening the air between man and predator. The pup grew bolder, bounding clumsily through the orchard, its play drawing faint cracks in the mother's stern reserve. She began to stand closer, her gaze still sharp but no longer bristling. Ethan realized that slowly, piece by piece, an invisible line was shifting. The wild was not retreating, it was reaching out. Rusty and the wolf pup began to play like brothers, tumbling in the tall grass, rolling over each other, nipping softly but without harm. Their laughter like yips echoed through the orchard, weaving joy into spaces once reserved for silence. Ethan stood at a distance, watching with awe. The mother wolf sat nearby, her chest rising slow and steady, her limp easing as the wound healed. For the first time, she allowed herself to lower her head and rest her eyes, trusting Ethan to watch over them. The orchard transformed into something unrecognizable, no longer just a place of labor, but a stage where boundaries bent and unlikely bonds flourished. Ethan felt his own life shifting, his loneliness softened by this unexpected family. It was fragile, dangerous even, yet deeply human. Somehow, he knew the wild had chosen his ground to speak.
The orchard became a haven at dusk. Orange light spilled through the branches, bathing Rusty and the wolf pup as they raced between rows, their shadows stretching long and wild. Ethan leaned against the fence, his chest warm with a peace he hadn't felt in years. The mother wolf circled the perimeter, always watchful, yet her vigilance no longer edged with threat. She paused occasionally to glance at Ethan, her eyes carrying a guarded respect. The pup, now stronger, bounded toward Ethan and sniffed his boots before darting back into the grass. Rusty barked happily, chasing after him. The harmony was surreal, a fragile truce held together by trust and innocence. Ethan knew storms would come, dangers from outside would intrude. But for this fleeting moment, the orchard was no longer his alone. It was shared ground, stitched together by loyalty and chance. On the 10th day, Ethan rose before dawn, anticipation stirring him from sleep. He carried food into the orchard, expecting their familiar routine. The air was cool, heavy with mist, the trees still shrouded in shadow. Then movement caught his eye. The mother wolf stepped forward first, her limp barely noticeable now. Behind her came the pup, bounding eagerly, and to Ethan's surprise, it carried a leaf clamped in its teeth. Dropping it at Rusty's paws, the pup wagged its tail. A gift, clumsy but heartfelt. Rusty barked and rolled over as if to accept the offering. Ethan's throat tightened. This was more than coexistence. This was recognition, a bond stitched with trust, sacrifice, and play. He whispered to himself, voice trembling with awe, that this was the beginning of something far greater. The orchard had become the birthplace of an extraordinary alliance.
As the days passed, Ethan noticed a pattern taking root. Each morning, the wolves appeared like clockwork, slipping between the trees as though the orchard belonged to them. The pup grew braver, chasing Rusty through rows of apples, its small paws scattering dew. Ethan watched from a respectful distance, never crossing the invisible line the mother held. Yet slowly, that line shifted. She no longer stiffened when he moved, her gaze lingering with guarded acceptance. In the evenings, when the orchard glowed beneath the setting sun, the pup would tumble into Rusty's side, panting with joy. The sight stirred something deep within Ethan, the recognition that he was witnessing a bridge across worlds, built not by words, but by loyalty and innocence. For the first time in years, his solitude eased, replaced by the rhythm of wild footsteps in his orchard. The bond between Rusty and the wolf pup grew into a ritual. They mirrored each other, running, rolling, and even sharing scraps of food Ethan left behind. One afternoon, Ethan saw the pup snatch a fallen apple, toss it clumsily, and chase it down while Rusty barked with glee. The mother wolf stood nearby, her chest rising and falling with calm control, as if satisfied her young one had found strength. Ethan realized the pup was changing before his eyes. Its once fragile frame had filled with energy, its eyes sharpened with curiosity. Still, each playful pounce toward Rusty carried innocence, not malice. Ethan leaned against the fence, heart swelling. The orchard was no longer a simple place of harvest. It had become a cradle for something rare, the collision of wild blood and domestic loyalty, weaving a fragile peace too delicate to last.
On a crisp morning, the mother wolf broke her usual pattern. Instead of circling the orchard in silence, she stepped closer to Ethan, her paws pressing into the earth with deliberate weight. Rusty and the pup froze mid-play, their eyes darting between them. Ethan stood still, resisting every instinct to step back. The wolf's eyes were sharp, assessing but not hostile. After a long silence, she lowered her head toward the ground, then turned away to watch her pup. It was a gesture subtle but unmistakable. Permission. Ethan felt his chest tighten as understanding sank in. She no longer saw him as a threat. The orchard had become neutral ground, a sanctuary. For the first time, Ethan dared to believe this fragile truce might hold, that maybe predator and protector could share more than a fleeting coexistence. He was wrong. Storms always come. That night, the skies shifted. Clouds rolled heavy across the horizon, the air thick with the metallic scent of rain. Ethan heard distant thunder as he sat on his porch, the orchard swaying in restless wind. Rusty growled softly, ears perked toward the dark fields. Ethan followed his gaze and caught a glimpse. Two silhouettes, the wolf and her pup, moving restlessly at the edge of the trees. They were unsettled, their posture sharp, pacing. Lightning cracked, spilling white fire across the land. The pup whined, its small frame trembling, pressing closer to its mother. Ethan knew storms could cripple the wild. Dens often flooded, small creatures lost in sudden torrents. His chest tightened with dread. If this storm grew, the fragile sanctuary he had built with them might be tested in ways he wasn't ready for. The wild didn't forgive weakness,
The storm broke with violence, hammering rain down in sheets that rattled the orchard. Branches whipped, apples crashed to the ground, and mud swallowed the earth in greedy gulps. Ethan struggled to sleep, his thoughts tangled with worry for the wolves. Rusty paced the cabin floor, ears pricked, body tense with restless energy. Suddenly, over the roar of the storm, Ethan thought he heard it, a distant whine, faint but desperate. His heart jolted. He threw on his coat, lantern in hand, and followed Rusty into the downpour. The orchard had transformed into a battlefield of wind and water. Rain stung his face, and lightning split the sky, casting everything in terrifying clarity. The sound came again, closer now, the unmistakable cry of a pup. Ethan's boots sunk deep into mud as he pushed toward the tree line, knowing something was terribly wrong. The den lay near a low rise in the earth, a place Ethan had never dared approach. But tonight, water surged through it like a river. The entrance gurgled with mud and debris, half collapsed, the ground trembling under the storm's fury. Ethan's lantern caught a frantic blur, the mother wolf clawing desperately at the soaked earth, her body drenched, her movements wild with panic. The pup's cries rose from inside, muffled but urgent. Ethan's chest heaved, torn between terror and instinct. Rusty lunged forward, barking furiously, as if urging Ethan to act. The mother wolf spun toward him, teeth bared, before whipping back to the den, refusing to leave. For the first time, Ethan saw not a predator, but a parent. Desperation had stripped her down to the same raw truth any parent knew. Save the child, no matter the cost.
Lightning shattered the sky as Ethan dropped to his knees in the mud, his hands digging alongside the wolf's claws. Every stroke was a gamble. One wrong move and the earth could collapse entirely. The wolf snarled once, inches from his face, but then froze, panting, before throwing her strength back into the soil. For one breathless moment, man and predator labored side by side, united not by trust, but by need. The pup's cries sharpened, growing frantic. Rusty leapt forward, clawing at the earth too, his small frame trembling with effort. Mud clung to Ethan's fingers, water spilling into his boots, but finally, the earth gave way. A small, drenched body tumbled forward, gasping, eyes wide. The wolf lunged, seizing her pup by the scruff, dragging it into the storm's chaos. Ethan fell back, chest heaving, realizing he had crossed an invisible line forever. The pup shivered violently, pressed against its mother's chest, whimpering. Her fur, soaked and heavy, clung to her frame as she licked her young desperately, trying to warm it. Rusty edged closer, tail low but wagging, and pressed himself against the pup's side, lending his own small warmth. To Ethan's astonishment, the mother wolf allowed it. She did not growl, did not push him away. She bent instead, curling her body to shield them both from the storm. Ethan knelt, drenched, watching the scene unfold like something sacred. In that moment, he realized the orchard had become more than shared ground. It was sanctuary. Predator and domestic, wild and tame, bound together against the storm. His throat tightened as he whispered into the rain that survival had no boundaries. That night, under lightning and thunder, they were no longer enemies. They were family.
By dawn, the storm had broken. The orchard lay battered, branches snapped, rows littered with fallen fruit, mud carved into shallow rivers. Ethan staggered back toward the cabin, exhaustion heavy in his limbs. Behind him, the wolf and her pup lingered at the edge of the orchard, their fur plastered against thin frames, yet their posture proud. The pup no longer whimpered. Instead, it pressed confidently into Rusty's side, as though claiming him as brother. Ethan's chest swelled with quiet awe. He had witnessed something he never thought possible, the wild accepting him, if only for a night. The mother's eyes met his briefly, amber burning with silent warning, but also with something else, gratitude. Then she turned, leading her pup into the trees. Ethan stood barefoot in the mud, watching, his heart pounding with a promise he would never forget. That evening, as the orchard settled under calm skies, Ethan sat on his porch, Rusty curled at his feet. The storm's chaos still echoed in his mind, but so did the image of predator and protector curled together in the grass. He replayed the moment when the wolf had not only allowed Rusty to shield her pup, but leaned into it. It was a sight that broke every rule he thought he knew. A rustle at the tree line caught his attention. The mother wolf stepped out once more, her limp easing but still visible. At her side bounded the pup, stronger now, eyes alight with mischief. Ethan rose, his throat tight with awe. The orchard was no longer his alone. It had become a place where the wild found refuge, where enemies had chosen to share breath, and he knew the bond was only beginning.
Days of peace followed the storm, but peace in the wild is never permanent. Ethan was out in the orchard one morning when a sharp echo split the valley, the unmistakable crack of a rifle. Rusty froze, ears pricked, his small body trembling with alert. A second shot rang out, closer, followed by the faint laughter of hunters. Ethan's stomach twisted. He had known men sometimes prowled the outer woods, but never this near. Then came a sound that cut deeper than thunder. A sharp bark, Rusty's cry, answered by the fierce growl of the wolf. They were near the tree line, shielding the pup. Ethan sprinted, fear pounding in his chest. Through the branches he glimpsed them. Mother wolf standing tall, her body angled between danger and her young. Amber eyes locked on shadows that meant death. The orchard's fragile sanctuary was under siege. Rusty barked furiously, his golden coat bristling as he planted himself at the wolf's side. The pup cowered between them, its small body trembling, but not alone. Another gunshot split the air, closer this time, biting into the earth at their paws. Ethan shouted, his voice carrying across the orchard, but the hunters' silhouettes only shifted in the distance, rifles raised. The mother wolf snarled, her muscles coiled with both fear and fury, refusing to retreat. She had already faced storms, hunger, and injury. She would face bullets if it meant her pup's survival. Rusty mirrored her defiance, his small form a shadow of courage. Ethan's throat burned with desperation. He had never seen loyalty like this. Two creatures, predator and pet, bound together not by blood, but by choice, standing shoulder to shoulder against the very worst of mankind.
The hunter's laughter carried across the wind, cold and cruel. They weren't after meat, nor survival. This was sport, a twisted chase through land that wasn't theirs to claim. Ethan's heart hammered as he broke into the clearing, his hands raised in fury. He shouted, demanding they stop, his voice drowned by the crack of another shot. Dust sprayed from the ground at the wolf's paws. Rusty barked wildly, teeth bared, eyes blazing with defiance. Then the mother wolf lunged forward, not to attack, but to shield. She pressed her scarred body over Rusty and her pup, her head lowered, her frame a wall of fur and bone. In that instant, she was not wild predator nor cautious stranger. She was mother, protector, and warrior. Ethan froze, breath catching, knowing this moment would scar itself into his memory forever. A shot rang truer this time. The mother wolf jerked, her body twisting as a bullet grazed her shoulder. She staggered, a flash of red staining her fur. Rusty barked with frantic urgency, pressing against her side as if to hold her upright. The pup whimpered, its voice raw with fear. Ethan surged forward, fury blazing in his chest. He shouted with such force that the hunters finally turned, startled by his sudden presence. He stormed across the clearing, his frame cutting between predator and prey, his orchard now a battlefield. The hunters cursed, retreating with reluctant steps, their sport interrupted. Ethan dropped to the wolf's side, his hands hovering uncertainly. Her eyes met his, burning with pain, but still filled with fire. For the first time, she did not resist his touch. She let him steady her. The line between wild and man shattered forever.
Ethan worked quickly, instincts driving him. He tore strips of cloth from his shirt, pressing them to the bleeding wound, his hands trembling. Rusty whimpered, licking the wolf's muzzle, urging her to stay awake. The pup pressed into her chest, its tiny body shivering against her heat. The wolf panted, her breath shallow, yet she did not resist. Her amber eyes flickered with something Ethan had never expected. Not submission, but trust. Rain began to drizzle, washing the blood into the earth, softening the brutality of what had nearly been lost. Ethan whispered, his voice hoarse, promising silently to protect what fate had placed in his care. Rusty leaned against him, as though echoing the vow. And there, under gray skies, predator and man became bound not by fear, but by shared responsibility, guardians of a fragile life that had nearly slipped away. The following days blurred into a rhythm of care and quiet survival. Ethan cleaned the wound each morning, his hands steady, though his chest trembled with fear of infection. Rusty never left the wolf's side, his golden head resting against her flank, keeping her calm. The pup, once restless and playful, became gentle, curling close as if sensing its mother's fragility. At night, Ethan sat on the porch, listening to the wolves breathing in the orchard, their silhouettes faint against the moonlight. The bond had deepened into something beyond explanation. The wild had entered his world, and he had entered theirs. In the silence, Ethan realized this was no accident. Fate had chosen him to witness, to protect, and to learn. The orchard was no longer simply his land. It was a sanctuary, shared between hearts that should never have trusted one another.
As the wolf regained her strength, her eyes found Ethan more often. Once her gaze had been sharp and guarded, a warning that he was trespassing on her world. Now, though still proud, there was something else, a recognition that he had crossed a line few ever would. Rusty bounded joyfully through the orchard with the pup again, their games restored, their laughter-like cries cutting the stillness. The mother wolf watched them, her head lifted, her breathing steady. When Ethan approached with food, she did not flinch. She allowed him to lay it at her paws, her eyes meeting his with an unspoken truce. Gratitude, respect, and distance, all bound together in a single stare. Ethan felt his throat tighten, realizing the wild had not simply forgiven him, it had accepted him, if only for a fleeting season of life. The day came when the wolf rose to her full height once more, her muscles strong beneath her scarred coat. She paced the orchard with steady steps, her limp faint now, her head lifted toward the horizon. Rusty barked happily at her return to strength, the pup chasing after his golden companion with gleeful yips. But Ethan felt the shift immediately. The mother wolf no longer lingered with the hesitation of weakness. Her gaze stretched beyond the orchard, back toward the forests that whispered of freedom. Ethan's chest ached as he realized what this meant. He had healed her, sheltered her, shared his world. But wolves were never meant to stay. They belonged to the untamed wilderness, to shadows and skies far larger than any orchard. The thought of losing them stung, but he knew. Love meant letting go.
The farewell came quietly. At dusk, as the orchard bathed in the last fire of the sun, the mother wolf nudged her pup forward. It bounded playfully toward Rusty, tumbling in the grass, before returning reluctantly to her side. She bent low, brushing her muzzle against Ethan's arm, startling him with the gentleness of the gesture. Rusty whined, circling the pup, pressing his head against it, as if to hold it in place. Ethan knelt,
his hand trembling as he reached out, brushing the pup's fur one last time. The mother wolf stood tall, her amber eyes steady, filled with something deeper than words could carry. She nudged Rusty gently, a silent acknowledgement of kinship, then turned toward the trees. The pup hesitated, looking back once more before following. The orchard grew quiet, holding its breath for the final moment. At the edge of the tree line, the mother wolf paused. The forest beckoned, shadows stretching long and endless. The pup pressed at her side, eager but uncertain, glancing back toward Rusty. For a breathless instant, predator and protector, wild and domestic, stood bound by invisible threads. The mother wolf lifted her head and turned, her amber eyes locked with Ethan's across the fading light. In them, he saw not just gratitude, but acknowledgement, a recognition that he had crossed a divide most never dared. Rusty barked once, soft and plaintive, as if saying goodbye to a brother. Then, without a sound, the wolves slipped into the forest, swallowed by shadow. Ethan stood still, chest heavy but full. The orchard felt emptier, yet also richer, marked forever by what had happened.